you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.
We're at the Renaissance of Marriage Conference 2019, and I'd like to welcome Anthony Fisher, Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Sydney. Welcome, Anthony.
Great to be with you.
Lovely to have you. Tell us, Archbishop, a man of your position is very busy and has a lot of commitments, so why did you make it a priority to attend the Renaissance of Marriage Conference?
I think many people would know I've long had a great passion for marriage and the family and for supporting those in any way I can think of. I think that the challenges for marriage and family have never been greater than they are at the moment in our community. We know now for the first time in the history of civilizations, the majority of people of marriageable age are not married. We've never known that before in history. It would have been 90% married when my parents were kids. And here we are now with many people never even attempting a marriage. And we know in our own church, the number of church marriages keeps declining. And yet marriage is where most people will find their greatest happiness, where they'll find their formation and their health care and their formation in virtue and a lot of their early education and so much else happens within marriage and the marriage-based family. So it is so important for the health of our community and for our church that we recover a confidence in marriage. We recover the sense of the romance of marriage, that we want it for ourselves and for those we love, and that it's doable, it's sustainable, it's actually the way to fulfillment for many people. And I think lots of people at this conference have got ideas on those things, on how to make it attractive, sustainable, doable for people. I want them both to take away ideas and information and hear what's working where and what isn't working and so on, but also take away a confidence that this is worth trying. Marriage itself and the marriage-based family, but also supporting it for others in lots of different ways. Looking for ways of evangelising in favour of marriage and family, of catechising and teaching about marriage and family, of supporting them emotionally and psychologically and in so many other ways. Building a culture of marriage and family in a world which at the moment is not very supportive of marriage and family. I think a big one at the moment is that lots of people have not experienced healthy and sustained marriage in their own growing up. Through perhaps nobody particular person's fault, but for whatever reason, they've experienced a marriage that hasn't worked in their own mum and dad, perhaps a very dysfunctional family or multiple parents over time. So they haven't seen one in action that's worked really well, on which they can then model themselves and have the confidence, I can do this, I want to do this. Now, of course, deep down, even people who've had very troubled experiences of marriages and families growing up can still aspire to more and better for themselves and their own children. But it's a huge problem if you haven't seen how that works, the practicalities of learning how to compromise and to forgive and to keep open the lines of communication and the kind of qualities of character you need to sustain marriage and indeed to mature and flourish in marriage. And so that's a big challenge, I think, at the moment in our culture, that many people just haven't seen it for themselves. I'm convinced that deep in the human heart is the desire to love and be loved. And the most common place people will find that is in marriage and in the family based on marriage. So cultures can come and go and various laws and institutions and fads come and go. But deep in every human heart is that desire to be loved and to love in return. And so I think people will recover the romance about marriage and the confidence that this is doable and worth trying. And it's our task just to kind of light that spark in them, to give them the confidence and the support. It's not like this is something from a bygone era that's never going to come back. No, this is actually fundamental to the human condition and to what makes us happy and flourish as human beings. So I do have great confidence in the resilience and in the future of marriage and the family. I suspect they think of us as BOGANS. Bigoted, old-fashioned, God-bothering, anxious nincompoops. And they're determined to change us or sideline us. To do that, they'll have to change our most sacred institutions. I'm not talking about traditional leftist activists with long hair and faded jeans, nor even the academic, media and arts institutions through which they've made their long march. No, I'm talking about people with financial clout and political bully power, the CEOs of many of our biggest companies, who during the same-sex marriage debate, so-called, decided that they should influence not just those connected with their companies, but also the wider community and its social institutions and practices. Marriage equality significantly overstated the number of corporations and organisations drafted to their cause. But even more misleading was the use of the names and logos of those corporations simply on the CEO's say-so, without the approval of the boards, the employees and customers, the shareholders or the members. These included many heavy hitters of corporate Australia, such as Qantas CEO Alan Joyce and Telstra CEO Andy Penn. Joyce's take-home pay is $11 million a year, Penn's $4.5 million, while the CEOs of the major banks, all of whom signed on, get between $5 and $7 million per annum each. Penfold's Wolf Blass Chief Michael Clark scores $18 million a year. Wesfarmers Rob Scott, $6.5 million. Coca-Cola Amatil's Alison Watkins, $4.1 million. While Ian Narev, former CEO of CommBank on $12.3 million per year, has moved to the job hunting platform Seek, where CEO Andrew Bassett rakes in $20 million a year. So these guys earn more in a year than many Australians do in their entire lifetime. And now they're using their corporate financial clout to engage in the culture wars and even to redefine marriage. Meanwhile, on the other side, the bogans include low-paid battlers, migrants, and the quiet majority of people with traditional values on social issues. It might seem a David and Goliath struggle, particularly given the evident weaknesses today of intermediate institutions such as families, parishes, schools and local communities. But in the end, the church is not merely a human institution competing for market share, nor is it in the business of fighting ideology with ideology. Jesus responded to ignorance and spin with truth, not more spin. To hurt, not with hitting back, but with compassion and balm. To ideology and outrage, with graced humanity and humanised divinity. So we pray tonight and always for his grace. We contemplate, we hope with his wisdom. We act with his love, as we renew our evangelical energies and social contributions, especially in the arena of marriage and family life. Which brings me to part 2, speaking the truth. Now, for those of you that are wondering, when on earth is this guy going to finish? There are 8 parts, so you can start counting down. My Episcopal motto from the 4th chapter of St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians is speaking the truth in love. Without reliable teachers, the Apostle says, people will easily be confused, hard-hearted, alienated from God or each other, licentious or greedy. So it is an act of almsgiving, indeed of making love, to speak the truth to them and call them to conversion to God's likeness. Paul's thought is, of course we want to speak to people of all sorts, out of love for them, to reverence and learn from them, and to offer them the precious gift we have received. As in Paul's day, we live in a pluralist environment and cannot expect everyone to agree with us, let alone live all of Christian teachings. As Popes John Paul II, Benedict and Francis all said, the Church proposes rather than imposes her ideas. People are free in practice to accept or reject them. And that's why St. Peter thought Christians must be ready to give their reasons, authentic, persuasive reasons for the hope that is in them, seeking a hearing even in a world where many ears are deaf to the spiritual, many minds indifferent, many hearts hostile, yet where souls still hunger for more and better. In his apostolic exhortation, The Joy of the Gospel, Pope Francis suggested that this evangelising task that is ours is a joyful, if sometimes arduous one. Joyful because what Christians offer is inexhaustibly fresh, exciting and life-giving, and will bring others happiness and holiness. Arduous because we proclaim what we do amidst religious persecution or secularist indifference, in public spheres corrupted by rejection of the transcendent and all absolutes, and in private spheres disfigured by relativism and the cult of the self. Speaking the truth in love. My motto starts with a Greek word that's very difficult to translate. Aletheuontes is translated into Latin as veritatem facientes and into English as speaking or doing or living the truth. Or as one linguist put it, truthing. It suggests truthing is about more than verbalising propositions, important as they are. As Francis of Assisi famously said, we should preach always and, if needs be, use words. Much communication is, of course, non-verbal. We say all sorts of things by our posture, facial expressions, dress, what St. Paul VI called the language of the body. We highlight or contradict, support or undermine our verbal messages in these ways, non-verbally. Some actions and even silences speak louder than words. The deeper and truer the communication, the more of us that's revealed, sometimes more than we realise or even like. Speaking honestly manifests the person, who they are or think they are, what they know or think they know, what matters to them. But lying, asserting as true something we know to be false, intending the hearer to believe it, offers only a counterfeit, not just of the truth, but of ourselves. It marks the speaker as inauthentic and undermines trust. When people use corporate, political or spiritual power to impose upon others, the effect is similarly destructive. Which brings me to part 3, the second part of my motto, speaking the truth in love. This is where the in caritate part of Paul's motto and mine comes in. Sometimes people oppose truth and love. They might think, for instance, that their hearer is incapable of receiving the truth or using it well. And so they offer a more accommodating message. Here, I'm not talking about a prudent silence or about packaging. Sometimes it's best to say little or nothing, and always we must choose a register that well communicates what we want to say. But sometimes people think contradicting the truth or thinning it down is more humane, pastoral, merely a white lie. Or they just think it's best that the truth be smothered. In his encyclical, Charity in Truth, Pope Benedict explored the complex interrelationship of charity and truth and demonstrated the impossibility of serving one while undermining the other. Being inauthentic makes us less lovable. However well-meaning, lying ultimately undermines friendship. This doesn't mean we should speak harshly or without nuance. But if we really love, we can't just keep the truth to ourselves. We have to sing it out loud like a minstrel's love song, shout it from the rooftops like a romantic adolescent, whisper it to each other as long-lived spouses do. Real love has to communicate itself, be celebrated, even publicly committed to. Love of God is like that, and so is love of people. And because we want the best for those we love, we want them to have meaning, direction, hope, happiness. If faith offers those things, then we can't keep it to ourselves like a private treasure. When you've found the way, the truth, and the life, you have to share him with those you love. 4, why family matters. There's no better place to do this truthful loving and loving truthing than in the family. It's the microcosm of society. It's where most of what society does happens first and best. Leadership, education, healthcare, formation for citizenship, and economy. But it's also where most of what the church does happens first and best. Transmission of faith, education in virtue, formation in self-sacrifice, commitment and sanctity. Since at least the Second Vatican Council, we've called the family the domestic church, or church at home. And we've insisted the family is not only the object of evangelisation and care, though it certainly is, but it's also the agent of that mission. Family life expresses a creed, a kind of lived homily, tells by words and deeds what members believe is true and matters, and is a site of prayer, worship, catechesis, and service. Recent popes have set the bar high for what the family should be under grace. The Church expects heroism from families because it has known more families from the inside and served more families from the outside than any government, academy, or other institution in history. Rather than a law or policy, ideology or fad, it has a gospel for the family, by which Christ promises grace to make people whole, companioned, fruitful, missionary, and saints. In a cynical world that thinks evil inevitable, individuals always self-interested, youth fated to promiscuity and drugs, coupling temporary, and families predictably dysfunctional, the Church preaches a different wisdom. In his famous encyclical, Evangelisation in the Modern World, St. Paul VI took forward Vatican II's thought that the laity should bring this to politics, society, economics and culture, as well as to human love, the family, education of the young, professional work and suffering. The idea that the family ought to be the place where the gospel is first lived and then radiated out to the world was followed up by St. John Paul II in his great exhortation on the Christian family today. He taught that the mission of the family is to form and live with fidelity a communion of persons, to reflect God's love for humanity and Christ's love for his bride, the church, to serve life by procreation and care of the little ones, to share goods, lives, joys and sorrows, to educate, forbear, pardon, reconcile, to practice hospitality, especially to the needy, to serve the community and be a true sign of unity and peace, and to be witnesses to truth and evangelisers of the world. John Paul didn't think small for the family, nor does Pope Francis. In his exhortation on love in the family, he describes both church and society as families of families and says their health depends upon the health of the families. The family's mission, he says in this letter, is to resist contemporary moves by ideologues and lawmakers to distort marriage and family, to teach authentic love through thousands of small but real gestures, and to be schools of hoping, dreaming, calling, to be refuges from society, but also open to outsiders, to enact and preach a gospel against the culture of the temporary and disposable, and to be places of encounter where Jesus intrigues and saves. People think piety is about old ladies telling their beads, but the Christian virtue of pietas is much richer. It's about grateful reverence to all the sources of our being from God down. Now, if old ladies are good at that, good on them. The Old Testament proposes that we think of our relationship with God as like parent and child, or even husband and wife. The people of Israel can be faithful to God like a good bride to her husband, or unfaithful by sinful disobedience. In the New Testament, this is reworked in terms of the intimacy of God as daddy with his children, but also as a marriage between Christ and his church. But how are we to live a marital life with God? That's where I think the commandments come in. They are the terms of the marriage covenant with God. The first 3 commandments, on the Catholic way of numbering them, are about how to live in the family of God. The next 7 about how to live in the family of man. The first 3 are about venerating the one without whom we wouldn't be here, the one who said, "Let there be light and life and love," by reverencing him and no other God, by loving his name and power and never misusing them, by rendering him true worship and keeping his day holy. That bell was to tell me I've already spoken longer than an impact speaker would speak. The rest of the commandments are about showing reverence to others, without whom we wouldn't be here. The ones who mediate God's light and life and love to us. Here, the 4th commandment, on the Catholic counting, it's the the fifth on some other counting, honour thy father and thy mother, is the hinge between the two tablets of the law. Adam and Eve, the first father and first mother, our first father and first mother, were told to join as one flesh, to be fruitful and multiply, and to steward creation. Upon their pietas, or grateful reverence to God, they were to build the family of men. To honour them as our first parents, and all those between them and our own parents, is to honour those who also stand in a kind of parental or familial relationship with us. Our ancestors, our family, our people, our church, all our neighbours. Thus, after the fourth term of the marital covenant with God comes the fifth commandment, which focuses on life, the duty not to kill, of course, but also to guard, reverence, transmit and care for all human life, especially those given to our particular care. Modernity rightly emphasises the for self and for spouse aspects of marriage, but marriage is also and essentially for family. It makes man and woman into husband and wife, then husband and wife into father and mother, turning people related by promises into people related by blood. Through marriage and family, the light and life and love we have received are generously transmitted, generations cemented together, and human experience, idealism, and wisdom shared. The rest of the terms of the covenant follow. Marital, familial life, whether with God or man, obviously requires reverence for family itself. Hence, honour thy parents. But it also requires reverence for life, which is transmitted in the family. Hence, thou shalt not kill. For sexuality, as the basis of family, thou shalt not commit adultery. For property as securing family life, thou shalt not steal. And for communication, for as I've already outlined, love depends on speaking the truth. Hence, thou shalt not bear false witness. The 10 commandments, or 10 terms of the marriage contract between God and humanity, are 10 expressions of pietas, or grateful reverence for our origins and destiny. What happens when piety declines? In How the West Really Lost God, Mary Eberstadt recognises that a decline in religious sense will undermine ideals for marriage and family, such as indissolubility, commitment, self-sacrifice, and generativity. But she turns this on its head. A decline in marital family culture undermines religious culture. Smaller and broken families are less likely to transmit religious faith and practice. Failure to honour parents and children endangers not only the first 3 commandments through non-transmission of faith, not learning to honour God and abide by his law, not attending church as a family, but also the willingness to attempt the 4th commandment by attempting and sustaining a marriage-based family. The 5th commandment, through contraception, abortion, euthanasia. And the 6th, through premarital promiscuity and marital infidelity. As individuals struggle to live up to the ideals of family life with God and man, and the commandments that sustain it, society only makes things worse by, for instance, confusing people about what marriage and family actually are, habituating people to non-commitment, rewarding vice, and so on. Institutions and practices hostile to faith are increasingly hostile to family life, and vice versa. To lose pietas is thus to lose an essential glue for communities and foundation for democracies, more crucial even than the rule of law. When in his encyclical, The Gospel of Life, St. John Paul II called for a recovery of the covenant between the generations, he was proposing pietas, not just to shore up marriage and family life, but as the basis for the renewal of culture and society. And Pope Francis has echoed that call. That's my mum and dad, 60 years ago. Today I've suggested that a sound understanding of marriage and family goes to the heart of Christian character and morality, and so to our contribution to church and society. Societies that propose some contrary view of marriage and family, with some contrary virtues and ethics, endanger their own progress and the fulfilment of their members. In his theology of the body, St. John Paul did so much to open our eyes to the centrality of the nuptial mystery, to understanding the human person and community, the ecclesial person and communion, the Holy Family and even the Blessed Trinity. Undermining understanding of persons, sexuality, marriage and family, on this view, undermines people's ability to receive and transmit Christian faith. Someone who has never experienced sound fatherhood, for instance, will find it hard to relate to a father God. Someone who rejects the nuptial meaning of the body will more easily fall prey to ideological tropes such as gender fluidity and sexual reassignment. Someone who thinks that the state or culture can redefine marriage will reject the idea of a God-given plan or natural order of things. Someone who views marriage as merely a means of self-definition and fulfilment will find the self-sacrifice and commitment necessary for marriage or faith unsustainable. All the analogies will fail. Well, I'm not going to rehearse the many insights of John Paul's theology of the body tonight. You can read previous lectures of mine or the enormous literature that's out there. Suffice it to say that reducing marriage to a public commitment to love each other for as long as it lasts, validated by the state and by an over-the-top wedding ceremony, misses out on so much of the richness of the nuptial tradition, including mystery and complementarity, call and response, total gift of the self, sacramentality, for lifeness and for transmission of lifeness, sanctification and communion. When a man is ordained, he is handed the gospel book by the bishop who says, "Receive the gospel of Christ whose herald you are. Believe what you read. Teach what you believe and practice what you teach." In other words, be the real deal. Serve the church's mission. Tell Christ's story in all you do. If you believe the gospel of Christ, live it. Not half-heartedly, not thinned down to skim milk, but full cream. Let all you do manifest your heart and soul as a Christian. The great theologian Byron Parola, who appears here, says that after baptism, the church offers two sacraments of vocation, holy order and holy disorder. Holy disorder is how he experiences marriage and family life. The two states clearly speak to each other about the gift of self, about being spiritual spouses and parents as well as natural ones, about for loveness and for lifeness and for transmission of lifeness, about the challenges and graces of vocation. Of course, there can be unholy disorder in both vocations too, at a time when bishops and priests are on the nose because of past failures in our society. We need the lay faithful to step up and embrace their priestly, prophetic and kingly roles as intentional disciples and missionaries, more than ever. That's holy disorder. And that means we cannot be satisfied with a few evenings or an online course as the whole preparation and support we offer to would-be married couples to live their vocations. Of course, much of ordinary Christian family and parish life is precisely formation for this: forming character and aspirations, providing role models, instilling habits of loving well, providing sacramental and community support, hearing the word of God. But in Amoris Laetitia and elsewhere, Pope Francis has suggested that we need something parallel to the RCIA, or seminary for marriage. That means we must provide marital pre-evangelisation, long before marriage prep, using various means to encounter and befriend people from an early age, to hear their aspirations for their bodily, sexual, relational life going forward, to ignite in them a hunger for true marriage and family, as for faith and discipleship. Subsequent to marital pre-evangelisation will be marital evangelisation, which seeks conversion to the vocation of marriage and family, and so must contend with counter-Christian understandings of the human person, sexuality, marriage and family, doubt about the desirability or achievability of long-term commitments, especially after experiences of marital breakdown and family dysfunction, belief in the easy dissolution of marriage or in children as an optional extra, inclination long to postpone marriage, and in the meantime, to live quasi-marriages, and so on. As people demonstrate some willingness to embrace the Christian understandings about such matters, they will be ready for marital catechesis about the human person, sexuality, marriage and family, about the sacraments, including marriage, examples of and strategies for marital resilience, education in fertility, awareness and responsibility, and so on. Faith, prayer and sacrament will be crucial, and techniques and people to support or mentor in vocational discernment and character formation in the lead up to any engagement and throughout. Next comes marital initiation, the wedding. And here we must contend with the romanticisation and trivialisation of weddings, their increasing dissociation from word, sacrament and Christian community, disproportionate spending or attention to less important elements of the ceremonial, and so on. After any wedding, there must be a good deal of mystagogia, as it's called in the RCIA, or post-wedding reflection, enrichment and support at every stage of marriage thereafter until heaven. On this view, nuptial formation, enrichment and support must come from families, schools and parishes over many years, not just from specialist agencies around wedding time or urgent need for counselling time, and be extended well beyond any wedding. With that in view, Catholic Care Sydney has been meeting with other agencies from around the country, as well as Sydney Catholic Schools, the Archdiocesan Office for Family, Life and Outreach, the university chaplaincies, Sydney Catholic Youth and marriage education providers, with a view to developing proposals for a marriage catechumenate. Asking more of would-be couples may seem a big ask at a time when church weddings have dropped dramatically. But the need is as obvious today as the divorce rate or the even more alarming never married rate. Which brings me to my conclusion. I opened this talk with a rather bleak picture of Christians on the back foot, Davids against the Goliaths of society, especially in recent times against corporate giants who can so easily co-opt cultural and political power to match their financial grunt. But it wasn't Goliath that emerged as victor in the original tale. Perhaps the humiliation of the church in recent years has been precisely to bring her to her knees, where the church should always be at her best, and to make her more like David than like Goliath, relying on the grace of a God-directed slingshot rather than human scale and grandeur. Just as David defeated his gigantic opponent not by beating him at his own game, but by fighting a different game altogether, so too do we respond not with might, but with unwavering example, unstoppable prayer, unsilenced love. In the face of strong social pressures, we must not lose sight of the main game: encountering and proclaiming Jesus Christ, evangelising and transmitting our faith in him, proposing our vision for the human person, relationships, morality and vocation under grace, praying and worship God in ways that are worthy and welcoming, reaching out to and caring for those on the margins, promoting, forming and supporting good marital, priestly and religious vocations. Thanks be to God for each of you bogans, or frogs, embracing such a mission. Never, ever give up. God bless you.
So tell us about your time here at the Renaissance of Marriage. How have you been finding the conference so far?
I'll start. It's been very worthwhile. I feel the energy of all who have come, and that energy has only increased over the weekend. So it's a really great chance to affirm biblical marriage and family in the place that God has really put families as missional endeavors for the church.
And the ability to meet so many others who have the same concern and desire, and to form new relationships and meet old ones has been a beautiful thing. It's really been uplifting.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really great having you here. Thank you.
And keep up the good work.
Yes.
So what's been your biggest takeaway from the Renaissance of Marriage conference this year?
I think the opportunity to be with other married couples who desire to share the gift that we have together to other people. And particularly this morning with Anne-Marie Go's, the accidental counsellor, we often find ourselves in situations and want to make sure that we are shining a light on Catholic marriage and assisting others to do that. So I think some really, really practical tips that came out of that. So the conference is able to ground a lot of those things that we can do straight away with people that we come into contact with marriage preparation, or couples that we know that are in difficulty.
I found Anne-Marie's session, really, really good, because it just gave you some tips about how to talk to family and friends that maybe approach you. Because of the role we do with Smart Loving, they often approach us. They want to know how to help when things are bad for them. So it was really, really useful.
Well, thank you guys so much. We hope and we know we'll see you again next year.
Shalom World Television is coming to Australia. This is a great gift. It's been gifted to many parts of the world, and now it's our Australian turn to receive it with open arms. I welcome it, I bless it. It's going to really support family life, married life, youth, give us a resource that we know that we need really great help in these areas. May Almighty God bless this new resource coming to our land. In the name of the Father, the